Hi, it's Wednesday, September 24th, Tuesday the 23rd in the North Atlantic, and we've got several systems to talk about in the tropics today. Starting off in the Western Pacific, we've got Typhoon Ragasa, very close now to the south coast of China, and is bringing strong winds to the south coast, including Hong Kong now. We've seen some video out of Hong Kong of some pretty strong winds out of this storm. Behind it, we've got Tropical Depression or Tropical Storm 26 now, Philippine name Opong in the Philippine Sea. The system looks pretty good and is forecast to intensify into a severe tropical storm, maybe even a typhoon before it comes into the central Philippines. And once it gets past there into the South China Sea, where it could re-intensify and be a threat to southern China and Vietnam going forward. We've also got up here, worth mentioning, Typhoon Naguri still sitting up here in the far North Pacific. This system is deviating a little bit south now. It hasn't really made its way out to sea just yet, but for now, models still show this system meandering around here, but eventually making its way out to sea. So we're not worried about any long-term impacts, but we'll continue watching it just in case that changes in the future. Across the Atlantic, we've got three systems to watch. We've got Hurricane Gabrielle now coming off of its impressive Category 4 peak in the central Atlantic. The system has prompted hurricane watches in the Azores as it's forecast to quickly track northeast over the course of this week. And by Thursday and Friday, it'll be over those islands. And then beyond that, we could see some impacts in Western Europe from it as it turns post-tropical. And for the south, we've got a couple tropical waves, Invest 93L and 94L. Both of these have decent odds of developing in their own right as they track west-northwest, though have a very uncertain future as we go into the Western Atlantic. And we'll talk about that in a little bit of detail at the end of the video. But first of all, we're going to start in the West Pacific as we have for the past several days, off with Typhoon Ragasa, again, very close to the south coast of China. You can see again, here's the south coast, and here's the eye of the typhoon. So we're very close now to landfall of the system. And some good news is the eye of the storm has not made a direct landfall in Hong Kong. You can see it's due south of the city now, and so we will not be seeing a direct landfall occur in the city. However, the system has been kind of stuck in an eyewall replacement cycle for the past day due to partly the shear that I mentioned yesterday. Now, we have seen that shear decrease. You can see all the convection is now much more symmetric around the eye of the storm, but we still remain with two eye walls of sorts. We have an inner one here that you can see with the stronger convection, and then these other bands of stronger convection here outline sort of the secondary eye wall that we still have persisting around this. And it's not as strong wind-wise as the inner core, but satellite-derived data has suggested that we have strong typhoon-force winds within this outer eye wall. And some of the video that we've seen already out of Hong Kong kind of confirms that. We've had some very strong winds occur of typhoon force or exceeding that across the city. So it's going to be a very nasty morning here in Hong Kong as the center of the storm passes south, and we'll likely see landfall later today, still as a strong typhoon. And you can see that on the forecast here, making its way inland by this afternoon. And once it makes landfall, we'll see rapid weakening take place. It is possible if it deviates a little bit more south, possible that when it moves back over water before it moves into Vietnam, we could see some re-intensification take place, but the system will be moving pretty quick. You can see by Thursday afternoon, it's already moving back inland. So we're not expecting any rapid re-intensification here as it moves over water, but it could, intensify a little bit after it comes offshore. But apart from that, the primary risk that we're going to be watching really along this whole southern coast and even going further west is the storm surge alongside the wind. You can see this massive wind field that the system has, all pushing water into the north coast or on the south coast of China in the northern South China Sea, and that's going to make for a really bad storm surge here, especially in Hong Kong. You can see that bay area that's in the city. Once the center passes just west of you all, which it's about to do now, we'll start to get the strongest onshore push. And the unfortunate part of having this kind of double eyewall structure is the radius of maximum winds is now quite large. So you have a really strong push along the water further out from the center of the storm. So that's going to prolong the storm surge potential here, especially in Hong Kong. So that's going to be really prolonging the impacts that we see throughout the day today. But going into our day on Thursday, the storm will continue to push further west and weaken away, so conditions will continue to improve. But behind Ragasa, we've got something else to watch in the Philippine Sea. now Tropical Storm 26, Philippine name Opong in the Philippine Sea. This system does look pretty good today on satellite imagery. If we look at the visible loop as the sun rises, we actually see a pretty classic sign that precludes intensification of a storm into a typhoon, as we have all this thunderstorms kind of wrapping into the system center like this. It's a classic curved band look. And this makes sense because the environment does have a pretty favorable environment for at least the next couple of days. The wind shear that was impacting this a couple of days ago has pushed west as the typhoon further northwest has moved further west. And so now we've got light shear aloft and plentiful divergence off to the southwest. I can show you this if we look at the 200 millibar flow at the top of the troposphere from the GFS, and you can see all this divergence out to the southwest, and the only source of shear that we had was this upper low that is now backing northwest into Taiwan and eastern China. But that is now far north and out of the picture of the system, and so for at least the next day to day and a half, the system has an environment of relatively low shear, and so this, given with the structure, may see intensification take place into a severe tropical storm, maybe even a typhoon. We've seen some hurricane models suggest that being a possibility as we go towards the Philippines. The good news is it will likely be capped at some point of how strong it can get, because we have all this northeasterly flow east of the storm, and this is progressing west faster than the storm is moving off to the west. So by the time the system nears landfall, we see all this northeasterly shear directly impact the vortex of the storm. And you can see the red number there, it deepens down to 986. And then once this shear starts to hit the system, we end up seeing the value rise, showing weakening occur on the model because this is a now strong vertical shear out of the northeast. Now, there are a couple of caveats to this. For one, this shear seems to start hitting the system really hard at landfall, so it may not weaken to a very appreciable level by landfall. Alongside that, we have seen models like the GFS trend a little bit north, and it's possible that if it can trend a little bit faster and a little bit north, it could end up in this pocket here of lighter flow aloft. You can see where there's not as much blue to the northwest of this red L on this map. And if that is case, that may allow the system an opportunity to continue intensifying up to landfall. But that is really a real-time watch time thing. Right now, models are in general consensus that we will see the shear disrupted prior to landfall. But we'll have to see exactly what happens over the next day. And this is a general forecast from Ragasa. You can see having a tropical storm right now and becoming a severe tropical storm by Friday as it approaches the coast, looking for a landfall sometime Friday afternoon. And beyond this, into the South China Sea, the environment does get better as all this northeasterly flow begins to relax along the storm, and you can see we end up with a fairly light flow aloft, and again, that plentiful divergence off to the southwest. And with the warm water here, the system would likely be able to re-intensify. The one thing we still need to work out with how much the system could intensify is how far north or south is the system. One is the interaction with the Philippines. If it's further south, it would be moving through the central Philippines, which has more ocean, which may not disrupt the storm as much as the high terrain in Luzon further north. But also, it has to do with how much time does it have before it slams into land further west. Is it further south, so where it stays south of Hainan? That could be a higher intensity south to South China Sea, whereas it comes further north, it interacts with Hainan, and then that lowers how much intensity we actually see in the South China Sea. So a lot of uncertainty onto exactly what we could see happen in the South China Sea, but the Philippines, Hainan, and southern China, and eastern Vietnam definitely needs to be watching this system, as we have seen some guidance show that this could be a typhoon coming into the Philippines if that plays its cards right today, which it seems to be doing well so far. And if it's higher here, that increases the odds that it's higher here in this part of the forecast. So we could be looking at another typhoon here in southern China going through the latter half of this week and into late this week and into early next week. We'll watch that system as it continues tracking west, but we've got other systems to talk about as well, now moving off to the Atlantic three systems here to talk about. It feels a little bit more like peak season, even though we are going into late September now. The first one I'll briefly mention is Hurricane Gabrielle, well northeast of Bermuda now. This system is now coming off of its impressive Category 4 peak, likely peaked with winds of about 150 miles per hour, just based on the satellite estimates I saw last night. Very impressive for this latitude, but the system is now succumbing to the impacts of some of the vertical shear. You can see that if you look at where the eye is here, a lot of the convection is onto the eastern side, highlighting the impacts of that vertical shear. Alongside that, we've seen the vortex tilt with height increase. So you can see the ocean is not as visible. It's hard to see on this zoomed out view, but the ocean is less visible because the vortex with height is becoming more tilted with that westerly shear. Now, having said that, the system is not forecast to be rapidly weakening over the course of the week as it traverses the northern Atlantic. As I talked yesterday, the flow across much of the troposphere is fairly uniform in this part of the Atlantic on Gabrielle's track. So it's going to be strong in the upper levels, but it's also going to be strong at the low levels. So while there is some shear, it's not as high as it could be and as high as you would normally expect for the far North Atlantic. And so that's going to likely cause the system to more gradually come off of its peak. And it can still easily be a hurricane by the time it's coming through the Azores Islands by Thursday or Friday. In fact, that's the forecast from the National Hurricane Center, and because of this, we've now had hurricane watches issued for all of the islands in the Azores. Now, it is not going to be a major hurricane by the time it gets there. The forecast has it going down to the low end of Category 1, but still pretty potent, and we don't really get hurricanes on a typical basis in a season for the Azores, so it will be a pretty potent storm for here. And the good news is that, as is typical for a lot of storms that come through this area, it will be moving pretty fast throughout this part of the Atlantic. So we're not talking about prolonged impacts, but still, again, a potent hit for the islands. And beyond those islands, it will be turning post-tropical. You can see in the white colored dots there showing a post-tropical cyclone, but it could be still pretty potent by the time it gets to the coast of Spain and Portugal, and we could see some impacts there heading into this weekend. And from there on, we could see impacts spread further east into portions of Western Europe. But behind Gabrielle, we have two other systems to watch in the tropical Atlantic. We've got Invest 93L on the right. I need to remind myself which one is on the right and left here, because numbers can get confusing here. Invest 93L is on the east here, the easternmost tropical wave, and 94L is just east of the Leeward Islands today. So these are our two Invest 2 tropical waves that are tracking west-northwest and will be doing so over the next several days. And these systems both have good chances of developing in their own right. However, the future of both of these systems is highly uncertain because of multiple factors that we're going to be talking about right about now. Now, if we take a closer look at these systems, they do look both pretty healthy today. Overall, the environment has gotten pretty healthy for both of these systems to develop over the next couple of days. And we've seen odds of development come up because of this on the Hurricane Center outlook. However, take note of the proximity of these two waves to each other. They're actually already rather close to each other. And once these form, that becomes a concern for the interaction between these two storms, because it's called something like the Fujiwara effect. It's where two areas of low pressure get close to each other and start to revolve around each other. So this storm may begin to rotate to the north. This one may begin to rotate to the east. And this can cause a lot of uncertainty in the forecast, because exactly when that Fujiwara effect happens has huge implications for where the systems are positioned at any given point. And from there on, it impacts where the system will eventually track. Now, for now, models generally agree that these systems will not undergo the Fujiwara effect for the next couple of days. They will continue along their way towards the west-northwest, not really impacting each other apart from maybe some shear. You can see we do have some upper-level cirrus clouds here coming into Invest 93, and that from 94L could shear the system a little bit. But that's really the main impact that we're going to look at for the interaction of these two systems the next couple of days. But as we go in time, we see the environment is fairly favorable, generally speaking, for both of these systems to develop. And we've now seen models like the GFS and European uptick on the potential for both of these systems to form in the tropical cyclones. Now, if we look at the environment right now, We can see that over Invest 93, we've got an area of high pressure noted by the clockwise turning aloft. This is highlighting a low shear environment over the system. And generally speaking, for 94L, we also have a similar pattern, though we do have a couple of upper lows, which is having a stream of westerly flow come just north of the Caribbean. So this could impart some shear in the short term upon this, alongside some interaction with high terrain in Puerto Rico and Hispaniola. That could also hold back some development in short term. But as we get into the Western Atlantic north of the Caribbean islands, on this run, it's hard to see here because the areas of low pressure are so close together. 93L by this point is forming because it's not interacting with land and the environment is generally favorable. But as 94L comes north, the environment begins to get more favorable as those upper lows are now gone. So we now see an area of high pressure draped on top of both of these systems, promoting low shear over both of these lows. And we see on the GFS, for a time, we actually get two tropical storms forming on this model. Now, this is uncertainty number one. Is this actually going to happen? And I move to the Western Atlantic view so you can see it better. We don't know that this is going to happen. It's entirely possible that Invest 94L rams into the high terrain of Hispaniola and continues on its way towards the west, staying further south of this. We've seen some guidance show a solution like that, and that further separates them and changes the picture as a whole. But say it does form like this, and we have two tropical storms formed here in the Western Atlantic. These are very close to each other, and these will likely be undergoing the Fujiwara effect. In fact, we see that happen on the model here. And so now you've got the question of how do these systems interact? Where is one tossed and where is the other one tossed is sort of the best way to describe it. As you can see, 93L really does just get tossed to the north of the system and gets very close to the Carolina coast. And I'm really not going to talk too much more about this because what I've talked about so far highlights the amount of uncertainty. We don't know how the Fujiwara effect is going to go with these two systems. We don't know how the development of especially 94L is going to go over the next few days. And another factor that I have not even brought up yet is the pattern over the United States. Alongside all of that, we have an area of high pressure here, north of the storms, east of Bermuda. We've got a big ridge building over the northern US. This has been, in some runs, building east over the Great Lakes, cutting off an upper low like this. And this in of itself is a very uncertain feature for models to pick up on. And the interaction between this and these two systems and alongside the areas of high pressure that we have building further north makes for an unfathomable amount of different solutions that could end up here. So what we need to do really in the Greater Antilles, the Bahamas, Bermuda, and the US East Coast is just monitor these systems over the next few days. It is impossible for anyone to tell you what exactly these systems are going to do. What we do know is that these both have a significant chance of developing into a tropical storm over the next few days, and both may bring impacts to land areas, primarily 94L across the Caribbean and into the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos. And this is a current outlook from the Hurricane Center. I'll reload this to see if we have the latest one from them, and we don't, but I'd imagine chances are going to stay the same. 93L has a high chance of developing right now, about 90% over the next few days. 94L is a little bit lower because of some of the uncertainty that I just mentioned with some of the shear and also interaction with the Greater Antilles. But certainly something to monitor over the next few days, again in Bermuda, the Bahamas, Greater Antilles, and the US East Coast, as we could have a wide array with this kind of an uncertain pattern and also the interaction between these storms. We could have a wide array of tracks that could range from, honestly, something hitting the US East Coast to something hitting Bermuda. And this is a very wide range. And again, anyone telling you they know exactly what these storms are going to do is lying to you at this point because it's way too uncertain and nobody knows. And of course, I'll have more videos on these systems as they progress northwest. And as time does go on, we'll become more certain in exactly what the eventual evolution of these storms is going to be. That's all that I've got for today. Stay safe in South China as Ragasa pushes through. This will likely be my last video where I talk about Ragasa, but we certainly don't have anything to ignore in the tropics. We've got several systems to watch over the next few days, so it's going to keep us busy here in the tropics. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.